Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Hot debate on Capitol Hill yesterday as Republicans grilled FBI Director Christopher Wray. GOP members of the House Judiciary Committee accused the Bureau of political bias and targeting conservative Americans.
Wray doubled down denying the accusations. He also denied that the FBI is protecting the Biden family from corruption allegations. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke has more.
We heard two very different messages coming from lawmakers on the House Judiciary Committee. Republicans listing off grievances with the FBI, and Democrats listing off grievances with their Republican colleagues.
American speech is censored, parents are called terrorists, Catholics are called radicals.
In his opening remarks, committee chair Jim Jordan repeatedly accused the FBI of using their resources for political purposes. Claims FBI Director Christopher Wray forcefully denied.
My expectation for all of our investigations, repeatedly communicated to all of our people, and this is especially important in sensitive investigations, is that our folks take great pains to be rigorous, professional, objective, following all our policies and procedures, and do the work in the right way.
Republicans repeatedly brought up the Hunter Biden investigation.
Are you protecting the Bidens?
Absolutely not. The FBI does not and has no interest in
You won't answer the question about whether or not
politically.
that's a shakedown, and everybody knows why you won't answer it.
Democrats, meanwhile, accused Republicans of using the oversight hearing to protect former President Trump and return him to the White House.
Welcome to the legislative arm of the Trump re-election campaign.
Some members of the GOP have called for the FBI to be defunded, a decision Wray said would be disastrous for not only the 38,000 law enforcement personnel who make up the Bureau, but also for American citizens.
We would have hundreds more violent criminals out on the street, dozens more violent gangs terrorizing communities, hundreds more child predators on the loose, hundreds more kids left at those predators' mercy instead of being rescued, scores of threats from the Chinese Communist Party being left unaddressed.
Representative Ken Buck, a Republican from Colorado, questioned Wray over how his bureau can protect Americans while doing a better job of respecting their civil liberties. Buck brought up concerns with the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA, specifically when the FBI has used it to monitor Americans without probable cause.
I fear that we are going to overcorrect on FISA in Congress, that we are going to take away some tools that are necessary because there is a trust factor here that's missing.
And we've implemented a whole series of reforms, a lot of the public commentary about our failures. And let's be clear, we have had problems, and those problems are unacceptable, and I'm determined with my leadership team to fix them. But those problems almost entirely predate those reforms, even though some of them have just come out.
Overall, Republicans did not appear to be satisfied with Wray's responses and are expected to push for further reforms within the Bureau. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
I think it's against history to say the FBI hasn't been political. I think they've been political since J. Edgar Hoover. And they've made sure that they were unable to be assaulted by the elected officials by having dossiers on every single one of them. Just look back at 2016 and you can see the political fingerprints of the FBI in that election. And whether you're a Democrat and saying, well, they released some kind of information about emails in the closing weeks of the campaign, to the Republicans saying you should have never planted FBI agents trying to do some kind of trap of government officials and investigate a presidential campaign and then an incoming administration. But that's exactly what they did. And we all know that both sides, whether it was the email controversy or the Steele dossier, it was completely made up. The FBI should not be political. If they are, we're all in danger. In other news, the latest report shows inflation is at the lowest level in 2 years. John Jessup has more on that good story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That is right. Welcome, and welcome news for Americans trying to balance their household budgets. But economists are watching closely to see if the trend continues. Some fear a recession could still be on the way. CBN's Mark Martin has the story.
The latest report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows inflation is continuing to drop. Prices rising at a 3% rate, the slowest pace in 2 years. And that's thanks in part to lower gas prices, airline fares, grocery costs, and even cheaper used cars. The Consumer Price Index shows price increases easing a year after inflation spiked to its highest level in 4 decades. The inflation rate is down from a 4% annual rate in May. Experts say that means wages are now finally rising faster than prices. Although prices are rising slower, shoppers can still expect some sticker shock compared to pre-pandemic levels.
Prices are still rising for the most part, but they're rising at a slower rate. That is still an obstacle for consumers. You think about building off this ever higher base. I mean, that's a really big deal for bigger ticket items like rent. Shelter costs are actually driving about 70% of that monthly inflation increase. So that's still a real trouble spot.
Plus, prices are still above the Federal Reserve's 2% target. Economists are keeping their eyes on whether this trend continues through the summer. E.J. Anthony of the Heritage Foundation weighed in on CBN's Faith Nation.
Unfortunately, inflation is settling at 3%. It has been trending down. But if you look at the monthly increases over the last year, what you find is that 3% has essentially become the new baseline. In other words, there's no sign that we're going any lower from here on out. There's no sign that we're going to get to that 2% target of the Federal Reserve.
And as far as a potential recession, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says it's not completely off the table. Anthony expressed his concern.
I don't think there's a way out of this without a recession. You can't spend, borrow, and print trillions upon trillions of dollars and not expect any negative consequences. I'm not sure when we forgot that.
Another question is if the decline will affect the Fed's policy of hiking interest rates to bring down inflation. While economists say it appears those hikes are helping, they're still putting the squeeze on Americans trying to pay down credit cards or buy a home or a car. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Thanks, Mark. Well, in difficult times, people often turn to their spiritual leaders for guidance, encouragement, and inspiration. New research shows, though, that pastors in America need more support themselves. According to the Barna Group, in 2022, 47% of pastors reported feeling lonely or isolated at times. That's up from 28% in 2015. Barna also asked pastors if they frequently felt well supported by people close to them. In 2015, 68% said yes. Last year, that number dropped to 49%. Barna also found that only about 35% of pastors seek monthly spiritual support from a network of their peers or mentor. Barna says the research is to remind pastors that they don't need to bear their burdens alone and that their churches should also play an active role in checking up on them and helping them find support if needed. Well, the U.S. Surgeon General says loneliness is now a public health threat so severe that it's on par with smoking and obesity. CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson explains why it's become so widespread and how we can begin to reconnect with others.
America's top doctor sees loneliness as a painful secret affecting far too many Americans, including himself.
Because this is an issue so many people struggle with in the shadows, and they don't talk about their loneliness because they feel ashamed. And that was true for me as well.
Like many others, Dr. Vivek Murthy experienced it as a child and again as an adult.
It was my wife, Alice, who stepped in and said, "Hey, I'm worried about you because you're not reaching out to people. You're not socializing with your friends."
Research shows loneliness increases the risk of physical ailments like heart disease, dementia, and stroke, plus mental ones including depression, anxiety, and suicide. Doctors find the possibility of premature death due to loneliness could equal that of smoking 15 cigarettes a day and greater than living with obesity. New surveys show as many as half of adults are struggling with loneliness, and even greater numbers of children are. That may seem surprising since children appear to be connecting with each other on these things all the time. Technology, however, serves as a poor substitute for in-person connection, experts are learning.
I actually believe we're on the beginning of a tidal wave of brain and mental health problems in young people. And it's because we're just more disconnected than ever before, disconnected from our own families, because when people are together, their faces are buried in their gadgets.
Psychiatrist Daniel Amen blames the pandemic for making this problem exponentially worse. He believes we can turn things around by cutting back on screen time and returning to in-person activities.
So it's back to church. Go back to church. Get involved with groups. We have to go back. We need to come together to solve it. And really no better place to solve it than a church.
Dr. Amen also believes the government should put more resources into hiring and training mental health professionals so they're more accessible and affordable. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
An important report with sobering statistics. Gordon?
Well, if you have teenagers, if you're letting somebody who's not a teenager have one of those smartphones, rethink that and make sure that they know how to socialize. It's amazing to me to see young people literally in the same room, and instead of talking to each other, they want to text each other. I don't understand that behavior pattern, but they seem to. And is that going to lead to increasing isolation, where your only outlook in life is at a small screen and a handheld device? That is going to lead to mental problems. It is going to lead to things that we're just now in the beginning, as that expert just said, a tidal wave of that. So as parents, as grandparents, let's do our job to say, no, could you please look at me? Could we have a conversation? Can we talk about your day? Can we discuss things, and in that, bring them out from those kinds of devices that so want to, I mean, they're literally wired to be addictive. They're literally wired that if you're not paying attention to that device, that somehow you're missing out. Well, no. Have those conversations, and please press the issue, force the issue if you have to.